Once Kevin picked me up, there was the task of getting home. The first thing we did is drive to Kennedy Meadows North, got a drink and a snack. Thought about hanging around Kennedy Meadows until the dinner service started, but Kevin didn't seem comfortable and he was anxious to get back home. So instead, drove home to Pleasant Hill. That's where I took a shower, and then Kevin and I went out for a celebratory meal. Fortunately, at that point, it was after 9 p.m. and just about everything seemed to be closed. So instead of a fancy dinner, we went to a local 24-hour taqueria. You really can't go wrong with Taqueria Los Gallos. After that, Kevin went home, but I couldn't exactly rest. There was just one day to prep for the Relay for Life. So the very next day, I got all that ready. Right before the Relay for Life, I hosted a geocaching event, try to encourage the local geocachers to participate in the relay, as well as to catch up with the local geocachers that I hadn't really been seeing or interacting with for the last 6 months. Of course, attended the Relay for Life, where I manned a booth encouraging people to geocache. Everybody that donated to my penny per mile campaign for the Relay for Life, I really appreciate it. After the Relay for Life, there was another big family event, my niece Ashley's wedding. It was really the relay, Ashley's wedding, and the eventual turning of the weather that would rush me off the trail. If I had time, I would have liked to have gone back and do the 50 miles I skipped due to the Blue Lake fire. If I managed that, I could have rehiked the 57 miles between Etna and Sayad Valley that I did in 2020. If I did those two, I could have claimed a single year through hike. Despite the closure, I felt I could apply to be added to the 2,600 miler list and get my certificate from the PCTA. Here are some stats. It took me nearly 6 months or 178 days to get from the Mexican border on March 17th to the Canadian border on September 11th. But of course, I wasn't done. I still needed to hike the Sierras. I finished at Sonora Pass on September 28th, which was just over 6 months or 195 days. Had a lot of zeros because I took a 5-week break to go back to work and to let the snow melt a bit. As a result, I spent a total of 70 days of those 195 days off trail. In my mind, I split the mileage of my 2023 through hike into two categories, trail mileage and real mileage. I skipped 132 miles for various reasons, like the Marble Mountains that I hiked in 2020, the bridge outage in the Sierras, the Blue Lake fire closure. Once I go back and hike the Blue Lake fire closure, I will have a near complete footpath from Mexico to Canada. Sometimes when checking off trail mileage, the real mileage was longer than the trail. The bridge outage in the Sierras is a good example. Most of the time, real mileage is shorter than trail mileage. For example, when you're offered a ride while you're road walking. I don't count walking a spur to water sources extra real mileage because it doesn't check off any trail miles. I made some graphs to show my mileage and calculated my average mileage per day. But what average? Average trail mileage per day or the average real miles per day. I really like the real mileage per day number because it's a nice round number. Or it's so close to 20 it might as well be. Before I finally stop talking about mileage stats, I want to mention some remarkable numbers. My highest mileage days were in Oregon. I checked off 41.2 trail miles in one day, but only hiked 31.7 real miles thanks to Matt from the Bigfoot Tavern. I did two near 35-mile / 14-hour days. The first was to meet Julie so we could have a zero in Bend. The other was so I could have a little more time the next day at Timberline Lodge. My first 30-mile day was while I was still in California. Before I made the graphs, I would have told you I mostly did 30s in Oregon, but the data doesn't lie. For the whole hike, I only did 7 30-mile days. I might be the most proud of the 4 25-mile days in a row to finish out the Sierras. I guess I wasn't a fan of Neros, preferring zeros instead. I only took 4. The most memorable one being my 4th day on trail, where I actually hiked backwards a short distance to get out of a storm. Thanks, Dad. The through hike changed my attitude towards fitness for the worse. It taught me to eat as much as I could and to avoid exercise when I didn't have to walk. I got off the trail 9 months ago. I am now heavier than I was when I started training for the trail. In February, a month before my start date, I was 195 pounds. I was 190 at the start. The lowest I got to was 165. Right now, I'm at 205. Of course, I'm hoping to turn that around soon. The trail occupies a massive portion of my wandering thoughts. Probably doesn't help that I spend a lot of my free time editing YouTube videos, which makes me replay those days on the trail. I really enjoyed the 5-week break from the trail to get back to work. It was downright fun. After the trail, I still enjoy work, but I don't seem to take it as seriously. Not to say I'm doing a bad job. I find joy just being around my coworkers and solving the various puzzles-like tasks. That is my job. But I'm not fretting over the ways the corporate winds might be blowing. That is if I suddenly found myself laid off, that would be okay. I enjoy making these YouTube videos, though they're a lot of work. Most of my videos have been about hiking lately, but I plan to finish my Knock Weekly video series, and I want to start an Army Stories series. Despite the massive evidence to the contrary in the media, I now know people are basically good. There's nothing like a thru hike to reclaim your faith in humanity. I've only seriously hiked once since I got off trail. I went back to the site of Harold and my shakedown hike in the Sonola Regional Wilderness. It was nearly a year to the day since my shakedown hike and 6 months since I got off trail. It didn't go so well. I started way too late in the day and it was too ambitious. I wasn't mentally or physically prepared to do the 20 miles I'd planned. I turned around and only got 12 and a half miles. So what are my hiking plans right now? In August, my boys and I were supposed to hike the Blue Lake Fire Closure section. Riley dislocated his shoulder in October and again in February. He could live his life like Riggs from the Lethal Weapon movies, escaping straitjackets at will, or he could get it repaired. Riley chose to get it repaired. Presently, he's in a sling, and the doctor doesn't think hiking with us is a good idea. But who knows? Maybe Dawson and I can carry some of his gear, and if he wears a sling bag and a fanny pack, he can come along. I'm going to start training for that pretty soon. After the burn closure hike, I need to stay in shape because I have scheduled 2 Nepal hikes in October. The first one is a 2-week-long Annapurna circuit trek. I'll be hiking with a guided group around Annapurna. Although Annapurna is one of the 14 peaks over 26,000 feet, the circuit doesn't get near that height. The circuit is 111 miles long, goes over Tho Rong La Pass, which is nearly 18,000 feet. That'll be my lifetime highest elevation, unless you count airplanes. After going back to Kathmandu for a night, I will start a hike to the Everest Base Camp with a guide. The official itinerary is to hike 67 miles over 11 days with 2 zeros to acclimatize. Since it'll be just me and a guide, and I will already be acclimatized, I might be able to do a little faster. Long term, I'd love to find time for another leave of absence before retiring to hike the Continental Divide Trail. I think I can wait to retire to attempt the Appalachian Trail. Thank you to the Trail Angels for all the magic they provided along the trail. One of my regrets is not writing my video narration scripts while I hiked. I wouldn't have forgotten so many names of those I'd like to thank. In the following list, I thank those I remember, or I sort of remember. Thanks at Third Gate Water Cache for the first huge water cache, and to Professor for maintaining the cache at the Scissors Crossing. That ride by the Big Bear retired wildland firefighter was a big help. Daniel at his water cache before Tehachapi was amazing. Thank you, Devilfish, for the 4 massive caches of water, first aid supplies, batteries, and bug repellent in California and Oregon. To Dan for a night stay in his ski lodge in the Wrightwood area, and to at Cache 22 for keeping the water tank full at mile 1394, thank you. To the lady giving away watermelons and sodas at Bomb Lake, thanks. Inquisitor for keeping the ice chest full before Callahan's Lodge, thanks. The little old lady in Donamore cabin, thanks for the beer. To the van dweller supporting his wife's run through Oregon for the hot dogs, thanks. Thank you, Matt, the manager of the Bigfoot Tavern, for the ride to Shelter Cove. Thanks go out to the youth camp for a fantastic vegetarian lunch, and to the RV campers just outside the youth camp for the beer. Thanks to the couple of couples on the trail before Timberline for the 2 bouts of trailside magic. The cowboy and his helper chainsaw. The meal after Cascade Locks was awesome. To the huckleberry picking couple I met during their tailgate lunch, thanks for the Gatorade, fruit, and advice. To Uncle Jim near Chinook Pass, your bounty bites hit the spot. To the Norwegians and Eduardo, who took pity on me when I broke my phone, thank you for helping me get to Stehekin. The unbelievable kindness of Jessica was really appreciated. If you recall, she was the woman who drove me the 74 miles from Shaolin to Mazama. And finally, thanks to the anonymous angels who dropped goodies off at the random trail crossings. All that pales in comparison to the help from my personal and sometimes not so personal trail angels. Julie, my wife, and default pickup and resupply angel, you were the best. Dad and Terry, my stepmom, for all the help in Southern California. I couldn't have done it without you. To my son Dawson for the help in the Tahoe area. I hope you had fun seeing your old man on the trail. And of course, thanks Kev for picking me up at the end. An extra special thanks to Julie, Dad, and Dawson for not just helping me, but being trail angels to some of the hikers I met along the way, and some that I'll never meet. I can't forget to thank my narrators, Dad, Riley.
The cliff bordered the left side switchbacks for a while, and those were dangerous to navigate. At times he had to crawl.
Dawson.
Dad, who talks like this?
And Julie.
Not long after exiting the Obsidian limited area entry area. Dad, who writes this?
Finally, a shout out goes to those I consider my trail family. Nate, Peter, aka Tallboy, Max, aka Magic Hobbit, and Bruno from Brooklyn. See you down the trail.